How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about Tales from the Darkside, Season 3, Episode 1, and this one's entitled The Circus. And yeah, it's great to be back talking about this series. Last time I talked about it, it was a Season 2 overview, and then the week after that was Thanksgiving, and I was planning this whole big Thanksgiving special and covering a bunch of Thanksgiving movies. And in turn, I got a little bit distracted from this, plus Thanksgiving in real life took up time as well. But, you know, like 3-4 Thanksgiving movies, those are all done. Time to get focused on this again. And yeah, really good to be back. And with a really good episode too, Tales from the Darkside, the season premiere, really putting their best foot forward. Really cool stuff here. And also Season 3, we see the new Darkside title card. It's less painterly, the old one still on the box, but more like something you'd see on the front of a book. Yeah, it's different. As long as they kept the same opening narration, then we're cool. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the technical specs. This episode came out September 28th, 1986, and totally intentional, set last week of September coming right before October, spooky season, Halloween, horror is at its peak. So yeah, a good idea right there to start Darkside up just before horror season. That's cool. Anyway, this episode is directed by Michael Gornick, who I believe we've seen on the series a few times, and stars William Hickey, Kevin O'Connor, and Ed French. This episode was written by George A. Romero, series creator, based on a story by Sidney J. Bounds. And yeah, go ahead and do the Romero story first, just like in Season 1. Romero also wrote an episode in Season 2, but that was kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think it's really cool just to put Romero's out front and center. That's pretty nice. And yeah, this episode is about a gruff reporter, and he's going around trying to debunk things. And he shows up at this circus with a classic monsters theme. That's great. And he soon finds out that the exhibits are a little bit too realistic. Classic anthology horror this time around. Now, I mentioned in my review for Strangelove last season that was a classic monsters vampire story, and I'm like, Darkside hadn't really done classic monsters yet, I hadn't thought. And we got one vampire story last season, but now we open up with a full-on monster mash. I don't really think it's a spoiler to say what monsters are in here, especially because there's a banner, a little painting that shows you a lot of them. 4 monsters. A vampire, a Frankenstein's monster, a werewolf, and a mummy. That's just so cool. It seems like this episode of Darkside had a little bit higher of a budget, and it's cool to see them playing with it. 4 monsters, that's great. But in addition to being fun, this episode also means something. There's a metaphor within the episode that is George Romero talking about horror movies and talking about difficulties with critics here. The critic will routinely say either it's fake or gimmicky, but when he pulls out something genuinely scary, you've gone too far. That's crazy. You can't do that. I'm gonna shut you down. And this is stuff that Romero and Carpenter and Craven, all the horror guys in the days, did have to face critics that were, let's be honest, a lot of critics were really bad at reviewing horror. And it was either, yeah, you didn't go far enough, or if you did, how dare you go far enough? And there's so many little references in this episode to, you know, with the critic trying to debunk the circus, that you can tell is just Romero talking from his heart. And yeah, some cool stuff we'll mention in a little bit. And I won't spoil the ending, but I will say how this winds up and what the ringmaster has to say is a really good and interesting way to talk about horror, and a good defense for horror at the very end of the story, saying, hey, look, this is what horror is for. This is why you should experience some safe, controlled horror, like in a movie, or in the episode's case, a circus. And I did think it ended on a really interesting point and a fun visual. So yeah, this is Darkside going into the new season, putting its best foot forward. Fun special effects, fun monsters, and also a good meaning, and Romero really talking about working in the industry. Overall, a classic episode. And the vampire from this episode, featured right there on the front of the DVD, it gave us a pretty iconic Darkside character, and always good to see another cool Darkside character, monster pop up. That's always pretty fun. Anyway, without further ado, I do want to talk a little bit about the plot. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you guys have a basic understanding as to what the episode's about. But that being said, I'm going to dig in a little bit. So, no major spoilers, but here we go. We open up with this guy. He's the classic old school rough and gruff guy. He's got his hat, he's got his coat, and he's of course drinking and smoking. And he wanders into the circus, and he starts to write in his pad about how, oh, this is a rundown circus, there's nothing special here, it's where entertainment goes to die. Stuff like that. He's writing it in his notebook, and we see the big sign, Dr. Niss's Exhibition of Wonder, and a bunch of paintings of various monsters. So we get to see the paintings of the monsters before we actually see the monsters. A great way of hinting at what's to come, giving us a little clue. But anyway, he writes this down, and we get a cool introduction to Dr. Niss himself. When he lit a cigarette, he just flicked the match on the ground with no real regard for any potential damage. Man, nowadays fire safety is so ingrained in our heads, and just to see this guy just throw his match and not stomp it out, oh man, ugh. But anyway, he throws the match on the ground, and Dr. Niss comes up and he stomps it out, literally putting out his fire. And he, of course, mentions that he overheard him because he was talking aloud when he was writing, and the two start to talk. He's a critic, and he likes to go and find these types of places to debunk. You know, they're just shameless cash grabs and stuff, and he doesn't really believe these great ads you see on the side of the building. But he also mentions that he came here because he heard about this specific circus. You see, most circuses go to the big towns, try to draw big dollars, stuff like that. But this circus will stop in random little towns and only appear for one night only. So what's up with that? What's their game? And of course, Dr. Niss will say, oh, we're not money hungry. We just need enough to keep our crew fed. Classic ominous line there. But, you know, we get this dialogue and we get to see Dr. Niss is a really cool, classic, mysterious figure. One of those figures you see all the time in anthology horror where you're like, that guy is in total control, and always the jerk character is going to underestimate him. So he's a really cool character as well. But he asked him this question because he's writing in his notebook before the show even starts, and a really poignant line where he says, are you going to stay for the show, or are you just going to review it sight unseen. And boy, that's still relevant today. And, you know, you can tell that this is, again, another case of Romero venting his frustrations. Romero made another violent zombie movie? Don't show me that. And anyway, he explains, the critic, he goes, I'm here early, my car went off the road, I'm kinda stuck here. Can you give me a special sneak preview, an early screening? Which again, is something that a lot of movie critics get too as well. But Dr. Nis isn't afraid. He says, not only will I grant your special screening request, I insist that you get a special screening. You're going to get the special show. This guy is pretty cool. But I won't say every single act here, but it is worth talking about the first one, the vampire. Again, on the cover, classic Darkside creature. They wheel him out in his coffin. Doors open up. Of course, the doors open and close on their own. It's an easy effect to do, but so effective. But the vampire comes out, really ugly, Nosferatu-looking vampire. Great, just great gross makeup. And then the assistant comes with this bag and pulls out like the cutest little lamb you've ever seen and gives it to the vampire to eat. And of course he has blood all over his face. Really gross and violent stuff. And this is where the guy gets up and he's outraged and he goes, whoa, you said this is a family show. You're showing this to children? This is sick. And Dr. Nis says, we don't show this to children. When we do a show, we have them eat something small, like a rat or a snake or something, which is apparently enough to quell the critic. But he says why we're having the vampire eat this is he needs more blood, and those little things won't satisfy him, and we have to make sure our monsters stay under control, so we're gonna feed him a bigger thing when it's not a real show. And then you get him going, why, that is really good makeup. How'd you do the blood? Was it really the teeth, or did you have a razor hidden? And again, I can totally see Romero doing this. You make a movie, and then, you know, you get people that are critical, but they'll kind of be a little curious, just how did you pull off those special effects? And I could totally see this segment being a reference to, you know, people going, Tom Savini's work is gross. But how did he do that? How did Tom Savini pull off that trick? So I do like that they threw in this little bit there. But of course, after that, there's more and back, and he goes to show him the rest of the creatures in the show, and I won't spoil too much beyond that, but let's just say a fun monster mash. Things get pretty crazy with a fun ending. Overall, I think this is really cool. And like I said, a lot of this episode is Romero talking about making movies. You know, a circus is a cool thing. The classic monsters are a cool thing, but just think about what he's doing. A circus is where you show off stuff that's strange and special, an act, or, you know, a two-headed woman, or, you know, a mermaid that you totally caught, and this is really its petrified corpse, you know? The circus is where you go to show off amazing things, and horror is what Romero really loved. So he's showing off the classic monsters. He's showing off horror, but rather than in a movie theater, in a circus. And it really is a good parallel to what he actually did. And you get to see things like the critic interaction. Are you going to review this sight unseen, or are you actually going to see the show? Loving to tear it down and saying it's either cheap, it's not great, or if you actually do go so far as to make something really scary, it's too far. Why did you do that? How could you? And I don't want to spoil it, but it does end on a good defense for horror, a good defense for watching scary movies, and a fun little way to turn things on its head there. So overall, I really did like it. It's just a plain fun episode with a better budget, better special effects, and it's cool and fun to watch, but it also is an interesting commentary from Romero, and those two things just work to make it better. Overall, season 3 coming right out of the gate with a classic episode, that's really cool. So a great start off for this season. I can't wait to watch more. I don't know, like, this first episode, you could tell it had more of a budget. I don't know if that will translate to every episode in the series, but if it does and we get more monsters, that would be great. So I really do hope so. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Tales from the Dark Side playlist, where I've talked about every single episode from the first season. I also did season overviews for 1 and 2. I talked about Joe Hill's comic, and I did the Christmas episodes early, so this playlist is pretty long. If you want to see me talk about a bunch more of this, you can find a lot more here. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.